Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to Ron Dante, the unsung singer of the 1969 hit Sugar Sugar by the Archies. Stick around. Maybe you can pour a little sugar on me, baby. So,
it's a nice intro. Hi.
Thank you. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You know, MrMedia.com, MRMedia.com. Stop by and check it out. There are more than 700 archived celebrity and pop culture interviews for your listening pleasure. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of unruly 50-year-old men arguing whether Betty or Veronica is the hottest Saturday morning cartoon character ever in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Well, I still remember the first time I heard the song. It was September 1969. I was a new fourth grader in Mrs. Arneson's class at Judd Elementary School in North Brunswick, New Jersey, riding the school bus home. We were on Black Horse Lane, then a shady rural road, driving all the way to the end of it to drop off one of my classmates at her secluded home. As usual, when we had our regular driver at the wheel, WABC 77 AM was blasting through the tinny speakers. The song, days away from hitting number one in the nation, had an irresistible rhythm. Every kid riding the bus that day stopped what they were doing or talking about to listen. It was Sugar, aw, honey, honey, you are my candy girl and you got me wanting you, and believe me, it sounded way better than that. It's the kind of moment that sticks with you a lifetime. At least it did with me. It also launched a million questions. How come Archie sounded so squeaky when he spoke, but sang Sugar, Sugar so smoothly? Were girls made of candy? Who was hotter, Betty or Veronica? Oh, okay. 9-year-old Mr. Media probably didn't use the word hotter, but the intent was the same. And did Miss Grundy look that ugly when she was my age? Anyway, out of thin air, an opportunity arose to interview Ron Dante, the man who was the real singing voice of the Archies. I flashed back to that day on the school bus and knew the answer would be yes. In the years since, Dante, who was essentially discovered by Don Kirshner, has been a singer and record producer, having worked most famously with the young Barry Manilow, producing all of Manilow's platinum albums and 18 top singles from 1973 through 1981. He also did production work for Cher, Irene Cara, Pat Benatar, and John Denver. And with that, Ron Dante, welcome to Mr. Media.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you. So, got to get to the important stuff first. Betty or Veronica?
Right. It's been the question given to me a lot of times. I have to say, you got to go with Veronica.
Really?
Yeah. Veronica was named after a famous 40s movie star in the comic, Veronica Lake. Right. Very popular star. And Betty was Betty Grable from the 40s also. And Archie was really Mickey Rooney from the Andy Hardy. They really added those names. They modeled those characters in the comic books when they first came out after those wonderful actors and actresses.
Yeah, but if it was Betty Grable or Veronica Lake, I'm with you. It's Veronica Lake, but yeah. The cartoon, and I rewatched, of course, in preparation for talking to you. I had to rewatch the cartoon of Sugar Sugar several times, and there is no doubt in my mind that Betty was the hotter of the two in the cartoon series. I just got to say that.
Well, everybody had their preference, and we all grew up liking one or the other. Do you know that in the comic book, the faces are identical? It's just the hair that changes.
Really? Now I got to go back and look at that now.
Take a look at that in the comic books. It's the same face with a different color hair. They saved on animation costs.
Oh, well, let me tell you something, Ron. When I go back and look at that show, which as a 9-year-old I thought was so brilliant, and I look at it now, boy, you can just see it's got cost savings written all over it.
Yeah, it wasn't the most expensive show, but it was the number one show on CBS Saturday morning television for like 3 or 4 years. Oh. The people really related to the music and the wonderful characters.
Yeah, between that and the Partridge Family, every kid I knew wanted to start a band.
Yeah, definitely, and it inspired some of the first music any children ever heard was on those shows, mm-hmm. and that was the first impression. So they fell in love with the music, and they became music lovers for the rest of their life.
Now, from what I understand, you got the job as the voice of the Archies singing group through your friend Don Kirshner, who unfortunately just passed away a few months ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that audition?
Well, I had worked for Don Kirshner as a teenager at his publishing company. I was signed as a staff writer and singer, demo singer. I sang demos for all his staff people who wrote there. Carole King was there, Neil Sedaka, Tony Orlando, and I would do the backgrounds and sometimes leads. So I parted with Donnie for a couple of years, and I heard they were auditioning for a new TV show. A friend of mine was doing the tracks, and he called me. He said, they need a lead voice for Archie. You should call Donnie. I called Kirshner, and Donnie said, come on over right away. So I went to this recording studio, RCA Recording Studios in New York City, and I got on the microphone, and they asked me to sing a couple of songs that Jeff Barry had written, the writer who was writing and producing the event. And I sang Bang Shang-a-Lang, which was the first thing I ever sang, and they said, oh, you're perfect for this, and I got the job that day. And it lasted 4 years, and we sold millions and upon millions of records, and it was the greatest experience because I knew it had a great chance to be a success because it was Don Kirshner, the man who was behind the Monkees,
right?
He put the Monkees together and they were bigger than the Beatles at their peak. I knew that if Don was involved, bless his soul, and the writer who was involved, producer Jeff Barry, I said, well, this is a winning team. I am just lucky to be aboard, and that's the way it went. I auditioned, I got the job, and I sang a lead that day.
Was it? I have so much curiosity about all this. I mentioned in the introduction that the speaking voice of Archie was so different than the singing voice. Did people get that? And
nobody got it. Nobody really cared. When the music came on, they just loved the music, the dance of the week, the characters playing their instruments. The voice was done by people on the West Coast, character actors who came in to do the cartoon voices, and we did all the music on the East Coast. If we did all the music on the East Coast, we'd send it out and they'd animate to our music. But nobody ever mentioned the voice sounded different when Archie was speaking than when he was singing. But I guess that's the way it goes,
That's so funny. And how was it described to you? And was so many questions. I'm sorry, but Sugar Sugar was that huge #1 hit. Was that actually the first song that the Archies sang on the show?
No, it was actually the second year, actually, almost second season. The first season we had songs called Bang Shang-a-Lang, and that was our first single, first release single. Then another single came out, I forget what that was, and then the third single was Sugar Sugar. And do you know that? But by the time Sugar Sugar came out, the DJs around the country were not up to playing on a group that was animated. They were not. So a promotion man from RCA took one of the records, the promotional record, took the label off and gave it to a San Francisco radio station, the big one up there, and said, just play this. We won't tell you who it is. It'll be a mystery artist. See what the reaction is. And the DJ played it, and it became the #1 song on that station, and it spread out across the world. Then, of course, the promotion man said, this is the Archies again. And the DJ didn't care. He said, well, listen, my people, the phones lit up. So that was an interesting way. Who knows if Sugar Sugar might not have made it not for that promotion man.
Now, who knew that you were the voice of this song and who didn't know? I'm thinking that the who knew is a very small number and the who didn't is a very large number.
Yeah, the industry knew. The music industry people knew of me because I was a top jingle singer at the time. I sang commercials for 5 years before I did Sugar Sugar, and I was the voice of Pepsi, Coke, Dr. Pepper, American. I was the voice of McDonald's. I was the singing voice of every commercial you can name. So the industry knew, but the general public didn't know. It was a mystery. I was supposed to be anonymous, and that lasted for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then I did a solo album, and then Don Kirshner did a big media blitz on the voice behind the Archies, and that's when people started to know.
Did it bother you to go in someplace in 1969 and hear? And I know I can recall clearly you would hear that song everywhere. But did it bother you to go in places and nobody knew that was you?
It was a kind of a double-edged sword. I did sign on to be anonymous. I did sign on to be the voice behind a cartoon group, and the cartoon, when the record went number one, Ed Sullivan introduced the group on the show, and he said, "Now the number one record in the nation, Sugar Sugar, and here are the Archies." My mother called me and said, "Are you going to be on?" I said, "No," and they played the cartoon. So it was a double-edged sword. It was a little frustrating, but there was something great about being the voice of a number one record that circled the world. It just didn't hit number one in America. It was number one for 6 weeks in the UK. It was number one in Germany, France, Belgium, you name the countries. Nobody cared about the English or language at all in it. They just cared about the sound. And that was the thrill of it. It sold about 6-7 million copies that year. I mean, that's an astonishing. It was the number one record of the year. It beat out the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Fifth Dimension for the number one spot of the year. So I was very happy about it. And, when you sign on for something, you have to live by it. And I was fine with the anonymity.
Well, the Fifth Dimension, was that the Age of Aquarius?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, Mr. Media, you're so damn old.
Well, you were just a child listening to music, right?
That's true. I was 9.
Yeah, right. You were a baby.
I was 9. Well, of course, you weren't that much older at the time. What are you, 20, 21?
I was 20, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Boy, it really takes you back. Do you remember the first time you saw the lyrics for Sugar Sugar? Did it look any different than any other song? Did it look any different than, Bang Shang-a-Lang?
Sugar Sugar was written very briefly by Jeff Barry, who wrote Be My Baby and The Do Run Run, Hanky Panky, and the co-writer was Andy Kim, who wrote Rock Me Gently and a few other hits. So two of them wrote it, I heard in a very short period of time. When I got to the studio, I remember Jeff Barry was working with the rhythm section very feverishly, making sure that the bass was right and the drums were right. It was. I could tell that there was a special song was being made that day. And first time they put the lyric in front of me, I said, "Well, Sugar Sugar." We worked hardest on that vocal than any other vocal we ever did. I really had to create a character in my mind to sing the song. And to tell you the truth, I was listening to Donovan's Mellow Yellow weeks before, and I said, well, maybe I could sing it a little bit like Donovan, that hushed, sugar, honey. So I was kind of like hearing Donovan in my head, but it came out my own sound, my own East Coast, New York type of sound, and the sound worked. It was amazing. But when I saw the lyric, I wasn't aware that it would be as big a hit. I was astounded at the rapid, it hit the charts and just shot to number one. And we were getting played twice an hour on all the big stations in the country. I mean, people were getting inundated with the song, and it still lives today. We get hundreds and hundreds of plays every day in America and across the world.
Is there a performance royalty on that at this point?
No performance royalty for radio. They never set that up for the artists. It's just the writers get a performance royalty, 7 or 8 cents a play, which adds up to a lot when you have a big hit.
Wow. It's amazing. And who would have guessed that Sugar Sugar would be bigger than Bang Shang-a-Lang, My Heart Went Bang Shang-a-Lang?
That hit top 10, Bang Shang-a-Lang. And it's funny, when we debuted the Archies album, we debuted it at Madison Square Garden on their basketball floor, and we did a big thing with the Globetrotters. The Harlem Globetrotters played against me and all the local tri-state DJs. We got creamed, of course, but it was a great opening, and they played Sugar Sugar and Bang Shang-a-Lang and all the songs from the first album on the intercom system, so like 19,000 people could listen. It was a thrilling moment.
Wow. Do you remember where you were when you found out it was number one?
Yes, I had driven down to the local newsstand on a Sunday night. Cashbox and Billboard would come out early. So you could, before Monday hit, you could go Sunday night, drive down about 10, 11 o'clock at night to the local newsstand at 57th and 8th Avenue in New York City and buy the magazine. I drove down with my wife and picked up the magazines and opened it up, and there was Sugar Sugar and both magazines number one.
Wow. And
that was, for a singer who had, I started like 7, 8 years earlier as a teen. I was 13, 14, was making my first records. This was, what a thrill to see your song, the record that you sang on, as the number one song. I remember that moment incredibly. It was raining a little bit, but I was the happiest Sunday night guy in the world.
And for the moment anyway, question about the Archies. Were there any other Archies songs that you have a real, enduring fondness for?
Well, I really like Bang Shang-a-Lang. I like Jingle Jangle, which was a follow-up to Sugar Sugar that sold 1 million records. It was also written by Andy Kim and Jeff Barry. But on Jingle Jangle, I had to sing a falsetto part. They didn't even use the original Sugar Sugar sound, which I thought was a mistake, but it still sold very well. But it's funny, the girl voice on there is a girl named Toni Wine, who sang "I'm Gonna Make Your Life So Sweet" on Sugar Sugar. Brilliant singer, and she was the voice of Betty and Veronica. Toni Wine went on to write "Groovy Kind of Love" and "Candida." I mean, she was and now she's on the road with Tony Orlando as his keyboardist and background singer. So I always have to give credit to the other Archie, Toni Wine, who is a phenomenal singer and wonderful lady.
Well, we need to take a break in a second, but I want to ask you a Don Kirshner question before we break. I was thinking about how Paul Schaefer used to do that incredible Don Kirshner imitation on Saturday Night Live, the original Saturday Night Live. You worked in the office with him. What was he like?
Don Kirshner was the nicest guy you will ever meet. He was the most generous, loyal to his writers and singers that you would ever meet in the music. He was very unlike the coarse, hard music business. He was a good man. And he treated his writers with kid gloves and made sure that every Friday, every writer got a check for the final on a Friday. He didn't care if he didn't make money that week, but his writers and the people that were signed to his company had to make money. And he was like the uncle that you always love that comes to visit on Sunday and always gives you a $5 or $10 bill. He was that kind of guy, and a really talented man. I mean, he really knew a hit song. He had a publishing company that published hundreds and hundreds of songs that were hits. Unbelievable amount. He discovered Carole King, Neil Sedaka, Tony Orlando. Unbelievable amount of writers came through his stables, and he always treated us with respect and graciousness. And I think I saw a documentary on the Monkees the other day where it seems like they're painting him like he did something wrong with the Monkees, when the truth is he gave them their hits. He gave them hit songs, hit arrangements, made them independently millionaires, and they walked right out on him. And they did Head, the worst movie ever made. Okay, I can't help but say it's the worst movie ever made, and they destroyed their careers by leaving Don Kirshner, who honestly just wanted to keep them in the top 10 and make them the number one group in the world. So, but as a personal aside, I love Don. He was a great man, and he will be missed.
Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about another important part of your career, working with Barry Manilow. This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to, and I'm going to say that again, because it was written for TV.
Go for it.
All right, let's take a quick break, and Ron, when we come back, I'd like to talk to you about another part of your career, working with Barry Manilow. This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to the Mr. Media Interview with Ron Dante, the voice behind the number one hit of 1969, the Archies song, Sugar Sugar. And we'll be right back. All right.
Yeah.
Just move on down here. That was fun. You doing okay with this?
I'm good. I'm having fun.
Okay, good.
You're asking very good questions, Bob.
Good. Well, a lifetime of waiting to get these answers. You know how that is.
I love it. I mean, how can you go wrong? You're asking me something I love. You know, I've been so blessed to be able to do this. You know.
Good. All right. Well, and we won't go quite as long this session, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to the Mr. Media Interview with Ron Dante, the voice behind the number one hit of 1969, the Archie song Sugar Sugar. And Ron, in the first part of this interview, we talked about the song for which you were best known as a singer, Sugar Sugar. But in this segment, I'd like to talk to you about your production work, particularly with Barry Manilow. How did the two of you meet?
Well, we were working on a commercial. I was booked to sing a commercial, a new Coke product for Coca-Cola. And it was, I forget the name of the soft drink. It was a new test product. And they booked me as a singer. I walked in, and there was this arranger, the fellow who wrote it. And it was Barry Manilow. And he was just starting out in his career. And I loved his arrangement. And then when the singing part came around, he joined me to sing, along with, get this, for a jingle group, Melissa Manchester, Barry Manilow, Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson, and me. And we were all singing for this new product.
Wow.
It was a great sound. after we did the commercial, of course, the product didn't sell. It didn't test well. But Barry asked me, he said, "Oh, you're Ron Dante. I know you. You're a jingle singer. You were the Archies, my favorite group." He said, "I write and sing. I would love to play you some of my songs, see if you'd like to produce me." So next day I visited his apartment, and he played me some of his songs, one of which was Could It Be Magic? The Chopin prelude inspired song. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, this is quality stuff. I said, we're going in the studio. And I booked the studio the next week. We did 4 demos of songs that he had written, and we started to take it around. And we secured a deal with a label called Bell Records, who wanted to put out an album on us and gave us a budget. So that was the beginning of a 10-year run of making records with Barry. It took a few years before we got to Mandy, but boy, it was a labor of love. You know, Barry sings great, and he's a great person and a great arranger. And we had a lot of fun with those sessions.
There's a belief, I think, among people who are Manilow fans that he wrote most of his big hits, but I've come to understand that maybe that wasn't actually the case.
No, Barry was a very prolific writer. And on every one of his albums we did, there are 6 or 7 Manilow tunes. But among his hits, half of them at least were written by outside writers, that we always kept the doors open for great writers who could submit a song. So notwithstanding Barry writing Copacabana and Even Now and This One's For You, It's a Miracle, One Voice, the other songs, some of the others were written by great songwriters from around the world. Mandy was written by a guy named Scott English, very famous songwriter who wrote Bend Me, Shape Me. I Write the Songs, one of our biggest hits, was written by one of the Beach Boys, Bruce Johnston. It's amazing how when you have a hit as a producer and as an artist, songwriters send you their songs constantly. Every week I would get 30, 40 songs in my mailbox that were people trying to get me to re-record with Barry Manilow. But his writing ability is unquestioned. He can really write. But we just wanted to keep the doors open for outside songs.
What would be the key to writing a song for Barry Manilow during that era? I mean, he had a different... He's very different from other singers and performers of his era. He did a different way of presenting a song. Could you see on the page that you knew was for him and or wasn't?
It all started with the lyric. It would have to be a sensitive, original lyric and a title that catches your ear. Mandy was an unknown name. Not many people had heard of a Mandy in 1975. The song was originally called Brandy, but there was already a hit called Brandy. So if you listen to the lyric of Mandy, you will hear a terrific, sensitive lyric, original, and there was just one phrase, "You kissed me and stopped me from shaking." I mean, that was like it stopped me cold when I heard it, when I heard Barry sing it for the first time. And all his songs, I Write the Songs, I've Been Alive Forever. And the lyrics are very original. So I would say that's where it starts. And then it has to be an incredible melody. It has to be something like, Somewhere Down the Road. Beautiful titles he's recorded over the years in songs. If you look at the lyrics of Barry's songs, they are really, really high quality. There's no banality in those. It's very, very... the creative people came out and wrote for us. And we had to get through it. We had the help of the record label. The president of the label is a very creative man named Clive Davis, who really, really directed us and helped us through those years and funneled in some wonderful songs to us, including Mandy. So that would be the first thing I would say. That's what we were looking for, and that's what songwriters had to present to us.
What was a young Barry Manilow like as he started from this unknown that you met to this incredible fame? What were those years like, and how did he change over that time?
He just became more professional, but his enjoyment is still there. I just helped him on his last album. We did background vocals on his new album out in another month or so called 15 Minutes. 15 Minutes will be all Barry Manilow songs. He wrote a bunch of them with Enoch Anderson, his old writing partner. And when I met him, he was fresh, he was young, he was totally creative, and he was funny. He was like one of the most relaxed people to work with in the world. The band loved him, the singers loved him, the studio engineers loved him. He would joke, he would keep everybody buoyed. He was thrilled to be in the studio. So young Barry Manilow was very much fun to work with, and I must say every album I did with him was unbelievably fun. There were no roadblocks. There were no tantrums. It was all, yeah, this sounds great. Let's continue. And that's what I would think. And over the years, of course, his fame took him to places he had never expected. I mean, Barry once said to me, I don't want to be just a great arranger like Henry Mancini or a great writer like Burt Bacharach. But when fame hit, he became the centerpiece of his career, the singer and the man out front. And I think he rolled with it very well. For a while, it threw him off, and he didn't know how to handle it. But he got his bearings and is really enjoying life now. And he's got the same amount of friends, and the same people who started with him still contact him and are still with him.
What key moments, or key songs for that matter, do you remember from your 8 years working intensely together?
Well, it had to be the very first time we recorded Could It Be Magic, the Chopin Prelude song he wrote. It was just magical that night to hear the piano sound and get the mix up and have him sing Sweet Melissa, Angel of all those lyrics just beautifully. So that was a really key moment. Of course, when Mandy broke and became such a showstopper, and became number one. January 1975, it became number one in Billboard and Cashbox. I remember that month, with the first day, it was the first number one of the year. And that was a moment I'll never forget. And recording Mandy was another lightning strikes. You could feel the energy in the studio when Barry just went out with the piano, bass, and drums, sang a live vocal to Mandy, and that second or third take was it. That's the vocal we used on the final record, and it's people would drive their cars off the road to listen to it. So that was another incredible moment. Of course, when we had I Write the Songs, which became an anthem for Barry, that was another incredible moment. And then Copacabana, which was a breakthrough for Barry since he was known as a balladeer. And all of a sudden, we have a dance hit breaking from the Cuban discos in Florida. It was an amazing occurrence when Copacabana hit, and it won a Grammy for best vocal performance. So those were key moments with Barry.
Well, I have a confession to make. The first concert I ever went to, let alone the first concert I ever went on a date to, was Barry Manilow concert. I want to say it was 77 or 78, because I knew I just started driving. It was at the Garden State Arts Center. I went with Carol Berger. I got dragged kicking and screaming, but I have to admit it was fun.
Well, what a great thing to take your girlfriend to, because it's a very romantic evening. It's funny. He was probably doing his medley of commercials at that time, right? Yep. His very, very famous medley that we put together, his commercials and my commercials at the time. And it was really a showstopper. But what a great thing to go to. I remember those shows were full of excitement. We did a live album at the Eurus Theater based on that show, a double album. That still is one of the best live albums, I think, around.
Now, you said you just recently worked with Barry, but I have to ask, what ended the partnership, the active partnership in '81?
You know, Barry wanted to move on from the things he was doing with me and experiment, and he wanted to do it all on his own. He wanted to do his complete dream alone, no other input except what he was feeling. He wanted to do jazz. He wanted to do Broadway. He had different ideas, and he knew some of them might not be commercial successes. And our contract had been extended. You know, usually it's a 3-year contract with a producer. It ran for 8-9 years. So it was just fine. I understood he wanted to move on and flex his creative muscles as producer also, more control. Because when you have a co-producer such as myself, who's a senior producer in many ways, you've got to take their input. So I understood he wanted to move on, and we remained friends all these years. I helped him on his 60s album, 70s and 80s, great love songs, and now the new one, 15 Minutes. I help him. Once in a while he asks me to come in and help him with lead vocals or create some background sounds for him, background voices.
Well, I got to ask you, so we're kind of jumping through space and time here, but what have you been doing in more recent years? Touring a bit, I guess, recording yourself?
Yes, I've been doing so. I always love to sing, so I've done a couple of solo albums. I have one called Favorites, which has 20 of my favorite 60s and 70s songs. And I just did things, I did Grassroots and Association and artists that I've always loved. I always wanted to sing their songs. I did that. I tour constantly with a group called Back to the 60s, which includes the Buckinghams and the Outsiders and Climax. So I do that. I have kept my production chops going. I produce for Disney sometimes for their girl singers. I'm working on a new girl singer from Australia, kind of like Katy Perry. Her name is Brooke Toya, and she will be out in October with her new album. She is a singer-songwriter and unbelievably talented and unbelievably beautiful. So I am working on her album. I am producing. I go from the very new to the very classic. I'm producing legendary Steve Lawrence from Steve and Edie days.
Of course.
I'm just finishing up his album. We're doing a duet with Garth Brooks, and we're doing a duet with Barry Manilow. So things are active. I'm more active now than I was in the 70s. I don't know what happened. The moon must have changed, but all of a sudden, I'm just having the greatest time flexing my creative artistic muscles.
That's wonderful. And Ron, I'm guessing that people who want to follow up can find out maybe where you're playing or where your music is available at rondante.com?
Yes, that, and go to Facebook. I'm just the Ron Dante on Facebook. I keep in touch every day with that one. It's really more efficient than my own rondante.com.
Oh.
Because people really come in every day, ask me questions. All my schedules are posted and great pictures. You'll see pictures of me with all my friends, all the artists I work with, and it's a fun time. So please come visit me on Facebook.
Very good. Well, Ron, it's been a great deal of fun for me personally talk to you about the Archies and some of these other things. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
Bob, it was my pleasure. You have a wonderful show, and hello to all my fans out there.
Thank you. And folks, for more original interviews with America's favorite singers and musicians, surf over to our main website, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. If you've enjoyed today's show, subscribe for free to Mr. Media via email, RSS, or iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many parts of Hollywood.
Still there?
I am.
I just dropped my computer on the floor. It just shows the power of a laptop.
Wow.
The whole thing hit the floor, and it's still working.
Took a beating and keeps on ticking. Wow.